Hello everybody, my name is Eric Wood and welcome to Eric Talks, the show where I talk about things that are important to me. And today we are going to be talking about the Intelligentsia. Now, Intelligentsia is a really weird foreign word that basically means the learned class. If your economic and social position in the place that you are at is defined by the fact that you are educated rather than uneducated, you are probably an intelligentsia in a strictly technical sense. However, that definition of intelligentsia changed with the appearance of this guy, Vladimir Lenin. Vladimir Lenin was a member of the intelligentsia, and he was a member of a very particular type of intelligentsia, being the revolutionary intelligentsia. And ever since Lenin, intelligentsia has been defined as the educated group of people whose job it is to make sure that policy proposals are ready for when the revolution comes. Basically, what the job of the intelligentsia is to have these concrete policy goals in place for when something big happens societally, so that they can push for those policy objectives and accomplish goals. An excellent example of this is Vladimir Lenin. When the workers rose up, he was ready with the model for a communist system that was implemented as a result of that protest. A slightly less extreme example is Mahatma Gandhi. When a protest rose up in India, he and a group of Indians in the form of the Indian National Congress had policy proposals for an independent India. Another profoundly effective example of an intelligentsia figure is Martin Luther King. When unrest was occurring in the African American community in the American South, he was ready to have a list of laws that desperately needed to be passed in order to improve race relations in America. So, why am I telling you about the intelligentsia? Well, it's because America doesn't really have one anymore. You look out across the world in a lot of modern protests, and when protests happen, there are specific and actionable goals that those protesters are trying to accomplish. When Americans protest, it's largely just generalized, undefined anger. And this can be a real problem. Personally, I pride myself on being an informed voter, and as a voter who wants to see less police brutality in the world, and I see protests opposing police brutality, I personally get kind of disheartened when I don't know precisely what policies are being pushed forward. Again, let's go back to Martin Luther King. There was the Civil Rights Act. And every time there was a massive African-American demonstration, Lyndon Baines Johnson knew that Martin Luther King was going to be there saying, hey, this protest will stop if you just pass this law. And I also want to mention, I've been seeing a lot of these weird criticisms of Martin Luther King since these protests have been happening, saying that because he was a non-violent protester, he didn't accomplish anything. Like, he achieved voting rights for African Americans, he achieved civil rights legislation. To say that he didn't accomplish anything as a peaceful protester is kind of absurd. And when you look at history, the facts of the matter is that peaceful protest, by and large, is more successful than violent protest, as long as there are concrete policy objectives that people can be pursuing as a result of those protests. Now, I'm not going to make any moral judgments about how the protests that we are experiencing in the aftermath of George Floyd's death are being handled. The only opinion that I have is that I wish that the protesters had a concrete policy proposal that I could understand and get behind. Earlier today, as of me filming this, Andrew Yang posted a tweet that outlined his policy proposal for this issue, which is the creation of a new division of the Department of Justice to investigate cases of police misconduct, independent of the 18,000 independent police departments around the country. That is an actionable item. That is an item that when people like me hear it, I can understand whether I am for or against that action item. Personally, I'm for it. If you're against it, that's fine because it's a policy proposal. Now, when you compare that type of thing to something like Colin Kaepernick. A lot of criticism has been levied saying that, well, Colin Kaepernick opposed police brutality in a non-violent way and he accomplished nothing, and therefore non-violent protests are no longer effective. The problem there is that as I think back, and I followed the Colin Kaepernick situation very closely, I don't remember there ever being a proposal Kaepernick had. He never had a law that needed to be passed. He never had a police chief that he thought needed to be fired. He never had a specific policy objective that the movement he triggered could possibly have helped with. I would highly encourage the people of America right now, as we meditate on these protests that we are experiencing, to consider in a really concrete way what is the tangible result of these protests that we want to see. Because it can't just be no more murder. We can't just snap our fingers and get rid of bad people. What are the laws? What are the programs? What are the implementable ideas that we as a country can pursue to make the world better? And until those things can be articulated by the protesters and by people who are allied with them, until we can articulate what these protests are about in a practical policy perspective, then no progress will be made. Like, you need to be able to go into your city council and say, this is what you guys need to do in practical language. Every successful protest throughout history has had that characteristic, and if you don't have a concrete policy proposal, then the chances of your protest being effective go down tremendously. And therefore, it's important that we have an intelligentsia, a group of people who are hammering out policy proposals. I don't know what those policy proposals need to be. I don't think that's really my right to speak that into the world. I'm just saying that I hope there are policy proposals soon so that I can make my decision as an informed voter how exactly I can be supporting the fight to end police brutality. But before that can happen, there needs to be a concrete plan for how to do that. A friend of mine on Twitter said that a game that has no clear goals can either be quit or lost. And that's kind of what the current state of the protests feel like to me. There are no clear objectives of what's trying to be achieved. And if we can reduce the objectives to some policy proposals in true intelligentsia fashion, then I think that the energy of these protests have the capacity to create real and lasting change. But as long as they are nebulous and ill-defined, I don't think that change will ever come. Well, that's all I really have for the video today. Thank you so much for watching. Last night I was having trouble sleeping, so I did a live stream of me reading The Wizard of Oz, and some people on my Facebook seemed to really appreciate that, so I might be doing that again tonight. I'll be also posting that other video on this channel at some point. If that sounds like something you would enjoy, if you, like many other people, have found yourself staring at social media, freaking out about the state of the world, remember that sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is make sure that your heart is ready to tackle the challenges of tomorrow. So if you need to rest and relax, feel free to join me later today. And so, yeah, with that said, you are a beautiful human being. Try to change the world today. And as always, sincerely yours, Eric Wood.